at least you read the first one.
So maybe some other person can talk about the article since I haven't read everything.
Oh, thank you. Where's yes, good evening to everybody, and welcome to today's section. Yes, last Tuesday, we introduced ourselves to the slave trades on the continent. We tried to look at the numbers a bit, just to get some perspectives on it. Today, we want to focus on looking at the impact of the slave trades. Again, we are looking at the impact on the African continent or those who are still on the continent. Next week, we will look at the rebellion stories, and then we'll look at the impact on the diaspora. Okay. So we were asked to do some readings. I think the first one that I submitted was by Baraka Bai. I want to find out if you have been able to read. As I go along with the presentation, I may invite you to use the document that you have read to share your thoughts on some of the themes that we are going to examine. So I just want to find out those who were able to read it and then those who have not been able to read it so that we'll know where to start from. Yes. Yes, I'm listening. Satata, were you able to read it, please?
Yes, I read it, both of them. Well,
Okay.
it was happening when I read the first article, with all the fights going on, all the kingdoms scattered, all the emplacement of the new kings and who were profitable for the Europeans. Oh, it was very striking. It struck me a lot to find out that there was so much going on, and I don't understand a lot of it. Why it happened? For instance, that all the kings in that area were profiting from it also in a sense, because in the long run, none of them profit from it, from the slave trade. And it hurt me a lot when the commodity was just only humans. And in the beginning, yeah, ivory. Why they kill all the animals, for instance, to sell all that all that trade? Was it worth for Africa? No, it was not worthy for Africa, because what do they exchange with the Europeans? Cowries, alcohol, clothing, secondhand clothing. I mean, was it good for the society to have it? Because still today, Africa take secondhand clothing from Europe. If I see what the Salvation Army is doing, gathering all the old stuff here in Europe and sending it to Africa, we don't need it. My problem is, how can we change everything for the best now? Because now we know a lot what happened between the kingdoms and all the fighting going on. How are we going to restore each other again? I was surprised that the Festival of Feet in December. What day in December do they organize that festival? Do you know that?
Which
The
festival?
The Festival of Feet that they organize in Ghana every year in December to memorize the ancestor who fought against the raidings. It says it's in December, but I didn't wrote in the article what day in December they have this.
Exact date.
Yeah, the exact date in December when they have that. And in the end, you see all the kings lost all their powers and were replaced by governments that the Europeans installed. So we allow that also to happen.
Yeah.
That's striking.
Yeah, Sada, thanks for your views. We will take a lot more on that as we go on, and then I'll give you the specific as
Thank
to
you.
when these festivals are celebrated. Thank you very
Yes,
much.
it was a good
Great.
memory. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you too. Ashanda.
Hello. Yeah, I didn't get a chance to read it. I just saw it today. I'm an email person
Oh,
on WhatsApp, so I
oh,
don't check it really.
okay, okay, that's fine. Right. Yeah, Maureen.
Yeah, good evening. Yes, I just started to read them. The first one I had read already, but I really need to read again and again to
Yes.
take it really regular in my point of views and all these things. Very interesting. The second one, I'm just busy to read it right now, and I will finish it later on in the evening. I just
Very good.
start to read it today because in the weekend I didn't see it in the app. I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not in the weekend. I'm not using my app at all.
Okay. All right. Please do well to finish it up for us so that yes, we just want you to read so that the class can be that interactive. Thank you, Veronica. Your
Can I say
microphone is
something?
on.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I do agree with Maureen. Isn't it possible that we can get the text, the lecture on our email? Because when it's in the app, then sometimes you don't see it because there are a lot of other things behind it.
Okay.
But
Lisbeth.
in my email, then I will see it immediately. I don't have to scroll like in the app.
Okay. Okay. Lisbeth.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Well, the app is quite clean. We don't have spam in the app.
That's right.
So I don't understand if people are saying that there are a lot of other things in the app. We keep the app quite clean. And beside that, I created a folder, and there's a link that you find in the WhatsApp group.
Okay.
You find the description of the app where you can go to the folder with all the articles. So every article that we have shared,
Yes.
it's been uploaded in the folder, and you have access to it through the link. So
That's
you can,
right.
anytime you can access that. So please just use the link to the folder.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So we'll do that. We'll use that medium. Please try and get the articles as explained. I was on don't know. You are in now.
Yeah.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Nemo. I just came in the call. Thanks. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, the article there were two was the one. I think you sent the one, the impact of the slave trade in Africa first, right?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I read both, but reading the article, I always get I call it overwhelmed with the number of people that were taken from the continent. Because there was one science part of the article where they said in 1 year, so I think it was not sure, somewhere in the 18th century was like 190 ships leaving the UK. So it's almost every other day a ship was leaving the UK to grab people and take them away from the continent. And of course, that's, I think it was mentioned somewhere else also, that's of course also a huge brain drain. And yes, definitely an economy will suffer if so many people are being kidnapped from their hometown and from their locations. I do think when I read these articles, what I find interesting is that also for the authors, it's sometimes difficult to balance between the Eurocentric vision, and they try to introduce also an Afrocentric vision, because I underlined one way where he said, yes, they came with European goods, and he summoned silks, linen handkerchief, Indian clothes, and China. And I think none of those things are actually European goods. They stole them from the Asian continent, and they used them for material in the with African chiefs, sometimes warlords, or whatever. So yeah, so that was I thought it's interesting to notice that we also get confused or are not completely clear what we want to say. But I did understand what he was trying to say, of course. Let me see from this article if I had any other remarks written down. Yeah, yes. Oh yeah, because this one focuses much more in contrast to the other article on the Senegalese region. And was for me, it was an eye-opener to see all the different states or city-states or how you call them, ethnic groups to be mentioned, because often people always only talk about Africa as a whole. And it's good that we have now academics who do more investigation and come also to the exact internal wars that have been taking place between different ethnic groups or states or city-states. So that is something I have appreciated in this article. Let me see if I can say something else. Yeah, there was so much to say actually, but it was a good one to read. And when you do your presentation, you might come up with more.
We will come back. Yes, yes,
discuss.
Yes, yes.
And the other article was also interesting, with the focus on exactly Ghana, northern part of Ghana,
the northern part,
seeing all the different pre-old slave routes, the ones also that were used during the transatlantic slave trade, and also the ones that were used after the how do you call it, when the UK decided not to allow for trading of people anymore. So yeah, that also was a definite eye-opener. How the so what I did not really find in both articles was the numbers that we are talking about, because when you say the duration was well before the Europeans came to the African coast. When you talk about the domestic people being captured, raided, or caught in wars. But the number of people during that period compared to the number of people that actually left the continent for the transatlantic slave trade, I think I maybe overread it, or maybe you have to read the articles a little bit closer. But yeah, I could not spot that one, because I think it's also very interesting. Because if the people do remain on the continent, they still contribute to the development, economic, philosophical, and other types of development of the region, of course. If they leave the continent, then it's not possible anymore to contribute anything at all. And that's also a depletion of energy, human power, etc.
Right. Thank you, Kenneth.
Yeah.
Aifna, you wanted to say something earlier, and I think I called on Kenneth. You can come in with your submission, or we move on to look at today's stuff.
Dr. Nemo, there's a question in the chat. Somebody is asking, is it possible to get all the articles for the semester in advance?
Oh, okay. Yes. You give me 1 week, I should be able to put everything together. The thing is that there are other teams coming up that some of my colleagues are going to take up, as I mentioned earlier. So I'll just get in touch with them quickly and organize it all, and then give it to you ahead of the class, all of them together. That we can do that. Right. Thank you. Veronica,
Yes.
were you able to read, please?
Yes, I read the slavery and abolition article. Quite interesting, and it gives you a pretty good idea of the impact of it. The second article I found a bit more difficult to get through, so but I have my observations and my thoughts on paper. And my questions?
Okay, go on. Observations.
Observations, well, in the slavery and abolition article, I actually found it interesting to read that religion was also a factor in the raiding, that Muslim villages weren't raided. So that was something I found interesting. And it gives you a picture of the loss of skills, the loss of the causes of the depopulation of the continent. It's not only because of the raiding of villages, but also the migration of people to avoid being raided. One of the things I found beautiful, and I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, was the significance of the baobab tree.
Baobab tree, yes, that's it. Baobab.
Baobab tree. Well, I think that was yeah, I found that interesting to read. Something symbolic. It felt somewhat spiritual. Observation, the transatlantic slave trade, I'm very tired, sorry, seems to be an extension of the internal slave trade. And it just, reading the article, it saddened me to see that we started with ourselves and we gave others the opportunity to profit off of us.
Mm.
So that was it. But reading through the article, you can just picture the impact of everything that was going on in the continent, on the development of the continent.
Okay. Thanks for your observations and thoughts. So we'll take it from here. So consequences of the trade. I'm sure those who have read the first article, you've seen that the author has really done a good job in categorizing them under the economic consequences, the social consequences, and so forth and so on. But I want to take it up from here. First of all, we're looking at ethnic fractionalization, okay, on the continent, resulting from the Atlantic slave trade. And the focus is on looking at ties between villages that kept on deteriorating as a result of the slave trading activities, and villages raiding one another, okay. So on this theme, we are looking at the degree of diversity among different groups within the African population, the displacements and the missing of ethnic groups on the continent. We have earlier on established that centralized states or polities tended to prey on the stateless societies and making them the hub of the slave trading activities. Those who had the chance to read the second article, you understand that in the region of modern Ghana, then the Gold Coast, the northern region tended to be the hub for slaves. And if you have read, these people were supplying slaves to the southern territories because of the fact that they had centralized authorities and had been able to expand to inculcate these stateless societies under their fold. Therefore, resulting from these slave trading activities, a number of people in the north will be displaced as a result of that. And that will influence the ethnic fractionalization or diversity on the continent, and for that matter, in the Gold Coast. You also come to find out, as a result of this movement, communities in the South now that habits some of the people who came down south as a result of the slave trading activity that occurred. The integration processes have not been completed, and so there are still segregated communities within the southern zone here that we call the Zongo communities, which house some of these other ethnic groups. However, because of that history that these people were once colonized by those in the South, you have a situation where even in contemporary society now, any event that pitches one against the other begins to deteriorate that relationship that existed or exists between those ethnic groups. And obviously, you know that if one polity is raiding another polity, then it becomes very difficult for these groups going forward to work together in an open way. So one of the challenges that we have been facing even now is the fact that there's always some undertones of ethnic diversity, ethnic divisions in the polity of the Gold Coast and Ghana for that matter. And this is what is happening across almost all the countries on the African continent, where there exist diverse ethnic groups who were preyed on, and as a result of that, they are finding it very difficult for them to present that united front that they need to be able to develop. So there is a lot of fragmentations on the continent and divisions on the continent as a result of these trading activities. Again, you have this ethnic hierarchies and social stratification in our contemporary societies on the continent, where by virtue of that historical event, some ethnic groups see themselves to be in the upper echelons of the society than others, because in the past, they were able to raid those other communities. And so even now, again, I'll use Ghana as an example. See some ethnic groups like the Akan-speaking groups. If you come down specifically, we're talking about the Asantes because of their expansion under their chief, Osei Tutu, and the fact that they dominated a lot of these other polities in a way, sometimes feel like kingmakers in the country as compared to some of the other ethnic groups. And that actually brings about a lot of animosity in the polity against Asantes when you compare it to some of the other ethnic groups. And even if you look at the Akan group setup itself between the Fantis, the Asantes, and all the other Akan-speaking groups in Ghana, you see that there are divergent or diverse opinions as to who is occupying what strata in the society. However, those who were able to control and subjugate others and pick up people from there feel that they are part of the upper classes so far as the ethnic groupings are concerned within the polity. On the same point, we also note that the Atlantic slave trade and all these other slave trading activities will also result in some form of cultural assimilation and syncretism, where those who had to move, whether through coercion or willingly, had to assimilate or they had to pick on the culture of the conquering state and make it theirs. In some cases, you see that a mixed culture will develop if they were able to retain some of their own. Okay. Then, so the total effect of this ethnic fractionalism that resulted from the Atlantic slave trade is the fact that there is this persistent ethnic tension in Ghana. So that, as I mentioned earlier, it appears that for any event that as a people will have to decide on, ethnicity comes to play in our politics, in our economic life, in our religious lives, and so forth and so on. There's this undertone of politics, which is traced almost always to that event that happened, which caused some people to enslave others, right? The other consequence that we look at is political fractionalization and the weakening of states. And here, I'm also looking at intra-community raiding and kidnapping, and kingdoms that experienced civil wars as a result of participation in the slave trading activities. So here we want to examine the degree of division within the political systems, which was characterized by the presence of multiple competing groups, okay, and divergent interests, ideologies, and identities. Okay. And this is what hinders political stability in the continent today. The fractionalization and weakening of states emanates from the disruption of indigenous societies. We go back to the north, and as I've mentioned, you have several states, the Kokombas, the Nanumbas, the Mobas, which tended to be what we call acephalous societies, those without central authority. And as a result of the slave trading activities and later colonization, some of these societies were destroyed because without having that centralized authority to organize and to control, they became prey. And some of these kingdoms were preyed on to pick on a lot of people into the slave trading activities, okay, weakening state formation within those polities. And even along the coastal regions, you notice that those who were unable to protect their own in terms of being able to defend themselves against aggression from those from the interior, political centralization and development also slowed down. And for that matter, the Ga communities along the coast, you see that unlike the interior state of Ashanti, which was able to expand beyond its immediate borders, occupying the coastal areas at the point in time. They were not able to assert their authority then, as we have in the interior regions. All these things affecting political structure of these ethnic groups. Then on this same theme, we are looking at the legacy of colonial borders and the legacy of administration. So because we don't forget in a hurry that with the Berlin Conference in 1884, 1885, these boundaries came to be established, and some ethnic groups were coerced of, forcefully made a part of a nation that traditionally they were at loggerheads with. You go to the Central African Republic, for instance, the Buganders, who were traditional enemies with the Bonyoro people, were all placed within the same polity by the Europeans. And this has often led to these political instabilities. In Nigeria, for instance, we've read the fact that the Igbos and those in the north, mostly Muslims, and the South Christians were also put into one polity. And that continues to affect all their elections up to date, sometimes leading to clashes between them, because at any point in time, either somebody from the north must come to power or from somebody from the south. So there are these undertones that are ongoing over there. The intra-community raiding and kidnapping will also bring about trust issues. Okay, it's because if there is persistent kidnapping of people within a polity, then it becomes very difficult for one political group to trust the other one, because you could be raided easily by your own neighbor, right? And so these things will shape the polities of our times today. And then the other thing I want us to look at is a breakdown of traditional judicial systems. We've also mentioned this. When the courts were used to sort of help increase the number of enslaved people that could be sold, i.e., where cases that hitherto wouldn't have warranted being enslaved and sold were judged as such so that they could get the number of slaves. Again, those who have read the second document, you will come to understand this very well, that because there was a need for these groups in the north to pay tributes to those in the south, especially Asante. The courts were used to adjudicate cases that will result in a lot of people being incarcerated and thereby being sent as tributes to the other vassal states, right? And so judicial systems come to be used as a tool for enslavement. And I mentioned last week that one of the major consequences is that even to date, the trust in the court system in most African countries is suspect, because that institution allowed itself to be used to sort of help raise slaves for these polities. Now, we examine the long-term effects on two schemes, and this is where we all begin to speak. Scholars like Basil Davidson, Walter Rodney, Patrick Manning, and Joseph Inikori, they hold the view that on the whole, the slave trades have been very much detrimental to the economic development of Africa. If you read Davidson's book on the African slave trade, he establishes that the loss of labor and skilled individuals, as well as the loss of potential leaders, will be detrimental to the economic development of any continent. And so we haven't established that the preference for the enslaved was the young, active, and strong male. Then there was a loss of labor on the continent. This will go on to affect rent payment on land and changing the institution of land, which was required for some economic development on the continent. So for instance, looking at the numbers that were exported, you will still have the situation where there was land abundance and labor scarcity on the continent. And so there's no rent in land, for instance. And without rent and without the ability to own, people were not then willing to invest heavily in something that they did not have property rights over. Okay. And so this will affect the institutional development that would have moved the continent to its own indigenous founding of capitalist society, which would have propelled us into some level of development as we have today. So Davidson focuses on the loss of labor and skilled individuals as profoundly leading to some negative implications on our economic development. Then you have Walter Rodney in his book on how Europe underdeveloped Ghana and Africa, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. And he argues strongly that the slave trade contributed to the underdevelopment of Africa by disrupting both the economic conditions, social and political systems of the continent. He also mentions that this negative implication was as a result of the loss of labor, the human capital, and then the cultural heritage. And it deprived Africa the means to develop independently. Okay. And so that Europe had the opportunity without being disturbed with the movement of its people to other places, and so were able to independently fashion ways to develop the economy. African countries did not have that opportunity because able-bodied men, labor that could have tilled the land to ensure that there was productivity and so forth and so on, were shipped across the ocean, which will go on to help these polities, European enclaves, to develop at the expense of African continent. And then Patrick Manning, his piece on slavery, colonialism, and economic growth, using Dahomey as an example, says that, again, the slave trade disrupted local economies and then weakened indigenous industries, hindered the development of the productive sectors in African countries. So how did the slave trade weaken indigenous industry? We started this course by looking at the pre-colonial kingdoms or pre-colonial polities on the continent and how well developed these kingdoms or societies were in terms of architecture, in terms of economy, in terms of politics. We didn't talk about writing in Egypt, the development of science, and so forth and so on in the continent. Now, if you take his book and using the example of Dahomey, he establishes that with the slave trading activity and the insecurity that resulted from it as a result of the raids and the kidnapping, people did not have that atmosphere to go about their usual industrial activities. That is one. Again, he's talking about the fact that because the demand for local industrial produce was substituted for demand for human beings, indigents will no longer place premium on developing their skills and developing some of these indigenous outlook. Again, for instance, in the region of northern Ghana, where kente, the Asantes producing kente, of course, for themselves, and then exporting some of them. The importation of the Asian products, as was mentioned by Kenneth, will then come to compete some of these things away. And we even have it now, that as a result of the imports, the kind of imports that came into the region, a lot of us have developed tastes for these European goods, and that affects the market for locally made goods, even up to date. And so people have had to, for instance, in Ghana, try to promote made in Ghana goods to its own people, because we've come to so much develop some tastes for that which is foreign, instead of focusing on that which is in the local domain. And then finally, Joseph Inikoro will also establish that slave trade led to some demographic imbalances, and it will affect agricultural productivity, and then it will also hinder technological innovation on the continent. All these things leading to or having a negative impact on the economic development of the continent. And so in terms of the demography, we've established we've come to see that because there was preference again for the young, active male, you have a lot of females left behind and the aged, okay, those who are old, who couldn't support these things, or the very young people. And definitely, if you have these things, unless there is an engineering where gender roles are changed, then you will begin to suffer loss of productivity in the areas of agriculture and so forth and so on, right? And so all these authors will establish that as a consequence of the trade, the direction of economic progress in Africa has been moved away from development towards underdevelopment and dependence. And so we have come to depend so much on the West. We've basically been established as a primary exporting entity into the West, right? And then we have become importers of secondary products, or let's say manufactured goods. Because even after slave trading activity, when there was transitioning to legitimate trading activities, the focus again was on the production of cash crops and so forth and so on, all meant to feed European economies. And so they established that the very long-term effect of this trade is that it has affected our ability to develop our economies on the basis of what those in the European continent have been able to achieve over time, because they took away almost every resource, the human resource, the capital, in terms of the natural resources that we possess, to Europe. And the Inokoro will establish that the sad reality is that then they will add value to those things and then bring them back to us to buy. And so it doesn't help us in terms of we developing local industry and local skill sets. And we continue to look up to them for these things, right? The other view, okay, is also by John Fage and David Northrop. So Fage and David, they have produced some nuanced perspective on the long-term effect of the slave trade in Africa. They argue against the idea that the impact has been uniformly negative. And so it's not that they do not admit that it's been detrimental, okay? However, the claim is that the effect hasn't been the same for all geographical polities as we tend to think. Because the general idea is that the slave trade was bad, negative effects. Yes, they admit that some geographical areas might have been more negatively affected than others, okay? And so they say that there's a need for us to look at the regional variations in the impact. So impact was different across regions. They claim that while some experienced demographic decline, social disruption, and economic stagnation, it also did stimulate trade networks. It introduced new technologies or agricultural practices, and also led to the consolidation of political power in some polities. So for instance, talking about stimulating trade networks. They mentioned the fact that the trans-Saharan trade, if you look at, again, the region of northern Ghana, by directing the trade routes towards the south, you know, the trans-Saharan trade focused on movement of gold, coal nuts from the forest zones of the region of northern Ghana to the north. And then through the north, it went up across the Saharan desert, and then it reached various parts of Europe. But this one will reorient the movement, where people were now moved from the north as commodities towards the coast through. So from the north, you use the Salaga slave market as a marketplace for the trading activity. And then these people came to Asante and the forest zone, and then they were moved onwards to the coastal region. And so, yes, an effect is that it will redirect some of the trade networks that had existed. And they talk about improved technologies, the eventual use of the river bodies as a means of transportation, and then attempts to improve on transport and security to allow free movement of slaves through one ethnic polity to another. Is also something that will benefit indigenes who controlled those areas, then leading to consolidation of political power. Then acephalous societies had to be subsumed under larger polities and present a united front of a sort. These scholars also mention the fact that Africans were resilient and adaptable to the slave trading activities. So they developed strategies to cope with and mitigate the impact. For instance, economic diversity in some of the polities that were involved in these trading activities, the adoption and use of European goods, the use of European goods, talking about the fact that they introduced some new forms of food products into the region, maize, cassava, which has become a staple food now. Initially, these things were all meant for the slaves as a way of feeding them before embarking on the journey, but then they become established within the polity, helping to improve to some extent the nutrition of the people on the coast and so forth and so on. And then they also argue that it has not had a very detrimental effect on our economy because it was just a continuity of the pre-existing slave trading dynamics that already existed within the African continent, right? And so we have David Northrop, who will establish, for instance, that coastal states, okay, that were able to, that were not raiding towns, okay, will benefit economically from the slave trading activity, because some of them became middlemen in the trading activity. And in Ghana, for instance, they developed a class that came to be known as the merchant princes, who took advantage, and some of them benefited from these trading activities. So yes, to a large extent, they agree that the effects of the trade have been negative. However, there is a need for us to look at the specificity of it, so specific geographical areas. And there's a belief that some may not have suffered in terms of development of their polities as compared to some other regions. And so they expect that those groups that were raided, for which the slaves were taken out, would have had much more detrimental effects than those that were the raiding groups. And so again, if you come to Ghana, whilst the population of people from the north was declining as a result of the capture and so forth and so on, you see that for the Asantes, population was rather quite stable, or to some extent increasing, because because of the centrality and the ability to protect themselves, will have either a stable population or an increasing one, and not suffer the total. And so all the effects accruing to it as a result of the loss of labor and so forth and so on may not have impacted the people in the Asante Kingdom as the case might be in the north or the enslaving zones, right?
Can we have can we have a break in the next 2 minutes or something?
Right, that's fine. So I was just going to say that when you come, we'll share our views on these things, and then we'll look at the other long-term effects of the slave trade, as some other scholars have also established. So we can take our 10 minutes break. We'll be back to finish this discussion. So whilst you're on the break, we can be thinking about some of these things. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Right.
A lot of the development. Oh, you missed most of my.
Yeah, it's my fault. Yeah,
no problem.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll leave it with this, Dr. Nimmo. So yeah.
Yes, Kenneth. Thank you very much. Yes, 54 countries, and yes, the language groups are quite a lot. In Nigeria alone, you have about 250 ethno-linguistic groups all put together in there, and we face attendant problems, right? Veronica, can I hear you on these two perspectives? Or yeah.
Sorry, I'm here. So how do I formulate my thoughts? Don't necessarily agree with the second one, that the effects are
yeah.
I think that from what I've read and everything I know of Africa in its current state, is that the effect is still visible, and like Mr. Donau says, from my perspective, I feel the continent was used back then and is still being used for resources. It's just that the type of resources have shifted, have changed from you from indeed human to now the minerals, etc. So I more in favor of the first one.
Thank you. Satata. You there? Okay. You have to unmute yourself. Unmute your microphone.
Sorry.
Okay.
I said all this raiding in Africa is still going on. It's the cause of all this hostility going among all these nations, all these ethnic groups. And I wonder about the position of the woman, because I read a part in the article that there were so many men out of the areas that the woman has to do most of the work. And beside doing the work, they have to make babies also to continuize the 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 population. And the population was not growing by then, but because of so many people were moving about and running away, and people were hiding. So I still wonder today what the position of the woman is now in these days in Africa. Because if I look at African art, for instance, I always see women dragging something, carrying something, or stamping food. It's always a woman is working. And some regions in Africa, when you go there, you see the woman planting, building houses, and the men are sitting. So it also brought something between woman and man. It still goes on. It's not just economics, but the social part of it also. And yeah, for instance, today I read an article about a priest who's marrying a 12-year-old girl. And I
Yeah,
think
in
to
Ghana.
myself, in Ghana, yeah, and I think to myself, what's wrong with us? Our mind state today. Where does it derive from? I don't know if this all has to do with this Atlantic
Slave trade.
slavery trade. We call it trade. I don't know if it's trade. I don't know why, but the position of the woman, like for instance, Boko Haram, we took so many women in Nigeria, and nobody worries about these women. Nobody fight for these girls. I mean, 90 came back or so, and then all of the rest is married and have babies. And I read also in an article, in the article was written that the parents who had problems to pay, like to pay something to another person, they would give their daughters away.
Yeah, pawn ship.
Yes, yes. So women are very important, and in all these articles, I read only about the problems that Africa have in general. But man and women problem is one of the worst things today.
So we will. There are other effects long term, and we are going to quickly touch on polygyny, the fact that men marry more women, and then we'll look at the gender roles. Why you see that in African art the women are always doing that. Essentially, those who have published in the field are telling us that because the young men were taken away, then the women had to take up those positions.
Yes, I understand that.
So provide that labor that was needed to sustain society then. But these are some of the other effects that we'll be touching on very soon.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very
Thank
important.
you. Saskia, I can see you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
I've listened to the two different views, and I agree with the first one. And I think I'm not so how do I say it? I'm not so in favor of the second view, but I can imagine that people would like to have a kind of rather nuanced approach, because the first one is so, how do you say it? When I was listening, it is so depressing. it's very depressing what has been done to Africa and the people there. So you have to, for yourself, maybe you have to have another hopeful, nuanced vision. But I mostly agree with the first one. And
but
still,
just
I
to put
think,
it into perspective, the second one, all what they are saying is that we should understand that different geographical areas were
yes,
affected differently by this one. So even though some had detrimental effects, they think that some polities might have benefited from the slave trading activity. Just to put it into perspective. I'm listening to you, Saskia.
yeah, maybe in the short term, some areas have benefited, but in the long term, I don't see how you can benefit when young people are taken away, people are opposites against each other. The whole colonial system, it's only, there's always a little group who benefits, but at the whole, I can't agree with the nuanced, the second version.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So those benefits are probably short term and not
And
in
for
a long
a little
term.
group. Most of the
little
time, the people who were collaborated with the colonizers.
Yeah.
The warriors.
Yeah. Yes, I get it. Thank you. Lashant, are you ready now?
Yeah.
Great.
So for the second one, I was a little bit confused because I wanted to know, they said that they said the effects which can be measured were, so I want to know what's the basis for the measurement, right? Because then it could be replicated. Let's say, for instance, we don't know what happened in the European, let's say particularly in the Netherlands. We don't know, let's say something similar of the same magnitude happened. Can they then replicate what that would look like? Could this measurement be applied to different areas? And what is the measurement?
That's a good one.
Right. So some have tried to use economic data sets to try and look at how African continent would have looked like if this event had not occurred. I think one of the scholars who have worked on this is Nathan Noon on the economic development of the African continent, trying to see if the slave trading activity had not occurred. But it's not a perfect measurement because it's just based on an assumption, right? But then sometimes the conclusion then is that a trade or without the trading activities, in terms of the economy, the continent might not have developed that much.
But I'm thinking about even like indigenous products, right? Byproducts and things that might have been used, and how that it might have started at one stage and then it hasn't gone beyond that. Let's say, for instance, like we have the Afrophone and it had the first one, and because of some type of some unforeseen situation, that it does not continue. There's no way to say that this thing couldn't have become something much larger because you stopped it in its infancy stage.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I get it. And so, yes, once you truncate the process, then you could not have looked at it. But then if you read again, what I'm seeing here is the social and economic effects which can be measured were surprisingly benign. That means not too much accentuated as the other scholars were trying to examine. So if you look at on the social front, the social effect, and for instance, if you look at the introduction of Christianity into the polity, you are trying to compare African traditional religion with the new form of Christianity and to look at some of the benefits thereof. And they are thinking that maybe the effects were not that strong.
And
the negative side of it, I mean.
I mean, it was further compounded by colonialism, right? So when you look in places like South Africa, where you have certain, like you have these disproportionate rates of underage drinking and um, AIDS, young children with AIDS, or parents, like this is not a lot of this is a byproduct of the deterioration of the social status and the religion and all the things that were there as safeguards for these families and communities. You take them away and you implement these European ideas into these societies that never had it. It just impacts people so differently. We even see I was reading an article about kids who are like they're young children who are going to college in the Netherlands from Suriname, right? They go there and they're so depressed, they're sad. The culture shock from being thrown into the system has just thrown them off, where they were jovial kids, very on top of their education in Suriname, and then you bring them to the Netherlands and they're just like zombies. Some of them, they don't want to get up. They're not the same people.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Great. Maureen.
Can I say something about that?
Yes. Who is
what Chantel was saying? Maybe it's true, but I also grew up in Suriname. I came on my 24th year. I came to the Netherlands, and in my first year, I was very depressed. I was very homesick, but I don't agree that that everybody is depressed or becomes a zombie, because I see a lot of drive in people who have grown up in Suriname and come here at a certain age. That's what I would like to say. So I don't agree with the all-together version that when people come to Europe, a lot of things were done to us, but you have to make your own choices. Even though you're homesick and it's a new culture, it's a new continent.
Okay, Saskia, thanks for your thought on that. In fact, next week we are focusing on effects on Europe, and I think that you'll be the best people to speak to me about some of these things, even though we provide the academic perspective on those issues. Maureen, yours, and then we can move on to look at the other things.
I'm agree with view number one, but view number two, I want to see also from another point of view, especially from the Western and political perspective, because I think it has economic and social effects when you look at all those investors and the decisions that the politicians takes in. They are still going along with the Western education part for all the people who live there, and the citizens, and the border lines, all these things, or the currencies, you see, and so on. So in that point of view, of course, I see like it benefit these kind of people in economic and social effect. I mean the one who invest in Africa, the Western people who invest, it benefit them. So in that way, you can say, okay, you can be agree also with the second one. It doesn't benefit the citizens who are there in Africa, but the ones who invest there, it benefits them.
Okay. Okay, exactly. That's the argument that those authors try to. Yeah, I don't know. I've seen your hand is up.
Yeah, yes. I want to make a quick also for the second one, because what happened 20 years ago here in the Netherlands was celebrating the trading relationship between Ghana and the Netherlands for 300 years. So it was a celebration, they said. And then they invited King Osei Tutu II come to the Netherlands. So it was a clear indication that some groups did have some beneficial effects of this whole colonial position between Europe and Africa. And also what happened then, because we have different ethnic groups from Ghana also living here in Amsterdam. Not everybody was happy that the man came actually to do this celebration of 300 years trading.
That's right.
And actually, one of the local councilmen, she's from Suriname descent, Hannah Belliot, she refused to shake his hand when he came along with all the dignitaries to get this. So yes, there is some tension there to see that some how you call it, communities were not completely left out and left in miserable state, and were actually participating in the the whole colonial situation and human traffic thing. Yes.
Right.
Quick remark from just remembered it just now.
Thank you, Lisbeth. It wouldn't be fair today. I haven't allowed you to share.
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. There's somebody. Oh, there's another person coming in. Yes, I have before I make my submission, I'm in the dark right now, so my batteries, I still have 50%.
Okay.
So I will be able to participate in the whole lecture, but it could be that at point all of a sudden I'm gone, and then you know what it is, what happened, and you automatically take over. So yeah, so I also agree with the first point of view that the effect is not, it's not only a long-term effect, but also if you look at the scale. So first of all, countries, societies, people are connected to each other. So even if you have one country or one area that didn't suffer as much as the other ones, in the long term effect, we all are dealing with a world economy right now that is favoring just a few countries in the Western world, and you know, we are really at here in Africa, we are really at the end, and everybody, doesn't matter if you are maybe an island such as Zanzibar, didn't really experience a lot when it comes to the transatlantic slave trade. But you know, in the long-term effects, all of us are affected, not only on this continent, but also in parts of the world. If you look at how, you know, geopolitical, the geopolitical structures of today, which is connected to the economic structures, you cannot, it's undeniable that there's a long-term effect, not only for many countries on the continent, but globally. So I find it, the second viewpoint, I find it a bit, it has some value, but if you look at the total, it has less value. Yeah, you can compare certain countries.
Lisbeth, I think we are losing you.
I hear somebody is sounds like
Winkler, if you can mute your radio set. Or if you can mute your microphone for, yeah, that's fine. Yes, Lisbeth, finally, we lost you there.
You lost me completely, or you've heard
No, I just get into the end of your submission when.
Yeah, so I find the second viewpoint, it has maybe some weight, but not that much, especially if you look at the total picture, the total where we are today in the world, like also the global picture, because colonialism was not only in Africa, it was also in many other parts. So I also favor more the first viewpoint.
Okay, thank you. Barbara, Joyce, if any of you want to share a thought, otherwise. Let me give you that opportunity. Barbara and then Joyce. Okay. I'm sure they may come in as we go along. So we have these other long-term effects from the literature. First of all, effects of the slave trades on polygyny. That is men having multiple wives, which is quite prevalent on the African continent and much more accentuated in West Africa. And so you have these scholars, Edlund and co, writing on the history, institution, and female empowerment, impact of historical factors on polygyny. And then Dalton and Lund also looking at why polygyny is prevalent in West Africa. D'Amico on the same theme. All of them concluding or arguing that slave trade targeted young adult males for enslavement, leading to gender imbalances, which tended to favor women in some of the regions. And so because you had more women relative to men that were available, it led to that creation of a system where men could have multiple wives to ensure that there was some form of procreation and continuity of society for that matter. We'll tie that in with this other empirical view on the effect, which focuses on the FGM, or what we call the LGC, female genital pattern. Corno 20 et al. 2020 also established that female genital cutting and the slave trade was connected because women were sold as concubines in the Middle East, and infibulation was used to ensure some form of chastity. And so from the historical antecedents, using the Red Sea area, those who came to be associated with this concept then adopted it. And that is how come you see that even in contemporary societies, these practices continue to dominate. If you come to Ghana, it's more prevalent again in the north because emanating from those imbalances, then there was a need for them to infibulate and to ensure that the many women who were left behind remained chaste. Some of them had to undergo some of these processes. And then I'll tie in the next one, then we'll have our discourses on that, because Satata mentioned its gender roles. And you can find details of that in Tesco's article 2019, female, which is on the long-term effect of demographic shocks on the evolution of gender roles using the transatlantic slave trade. And he says that women substituted for the missing men by taking up areas of work that were traditionally male prerogatives. So women whose ancestors were more exposed to the slave trade are today more likely to be in the labor force, have lower levels of fertility, and are more likely to participate in household decision making. Yes, so these are some other long-term effects that have been expressed, having been associated with the slave trading activity. I think Satata, I don't know, I'm sure you agree with this concept because you were more interested in that. And so Tesco is arguing that, yes, because these men were off, then the women had to rise up and provide labor in sustaining livelihoods. And so some of the things that you mentioned, that you see women building, you see women painting, you see women doing what in quotes were traditional economic activities that men undertook. And this is where the historical antecedent lies. And so I have met a third-year student at my university, a female from one of the Northern Territories, specifically she hails from Paga, who is a professional painter. And when I asked her how she became a painter, she told me that her mom used to do that. And then she doesn't really know where her mom picked it up from, but then she also adopted it. So even before coming to the university, this is what she's been doing too. But if you come to the South, and for that matter, the Asante area where I belong to, you hardly find women who are engaged in something like painting, for that matter. And this lady paints. It's not like just a single room. It takes up he takes up projects, and she's on the walls doing all that. Traditionally, you find have been a male-dominated region. Yes, the FGC and polygyny. And so we are having some of these effects on our societies even today. Any takes on these things? Those who have not spoken today, Joyce? And then Ifna.
So let me try. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Looking at polygamy, I was asking myself if this started, if this is an effect of slave trade, or it was since the beginning of Africa. I don't know the African history, so I'm asking. And if it has been growth after the slave trade or during the slave trade, because when I read books and hear some history, I understood that polygamy was since the beginning of mankind or manhood in Africa. So I want you to make it clear for us, please.
Okay, so the argument here is that because of the demographic imbalances, the institution was accentuated as a result of the fact that a lot of male were taken out of the polity. So yes, just like indigenous slavery did exists. The institution itself did not start from the slave trades as we are examining, which these authors do admit. However, the argument is that it was accentuated as a result of the coerced removal of a lot of active men from the continent.
Okay. Thanks. So I don't really have comments on these points. I think I can understand that like female genital cutting can be also could have its effects on the slave trade, because the more you lose the man, the more we have to be like how do you say it in English? Not homeless, but yeah. Can somebody help me put it in proper English, please?
I'm trying to get exactly what you want to say.
How do I say it in Dutch first? And then we will try to translate.
Ja, nee, ik wilde aangeven dat dit te begrijpen is, toch? Dat van die female genital cutting, toch? Omdat je, ja, als je geen man hebt, of als het moeilijk is om aan een man te komen, dat je dan liever zonder die seksuele gevoelens blijft. Want als ik het goed heb begrepen, dan komt het daardoor dat men dit systeem gebruikte, toch? Om vrouwen meer dus de gelegenheid te geven, of om vrouwen meer niet hoe zeg je dat? Maar in ieder geval dat vrouwen dan zonder een man zou kunnen leven.
Yeah, does anybody wants to translate to Dr. Nemo, or shall I do it? Dr. Nemo, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm thinking of taking a Dutch class now.
Female mutilation, genital mutilation.
Okay, I'll listen.
She's asking whether that has occurred because there were because the young women didn't find men to marry, so they closed themselves up physically because it doesn't have a point to to stay open. So I think that's what you were trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, I didn't get it all.
Yeah, so she was making the point, or was asking whether or not female genital mutilation occurred because the women, because young women didn't have men to marry, therefore they closed themselves up physically. And if that was the reason why female genital mutilation. So I do think there's a different reason why female genital mutilation started, but I would like you to respond.
Like how or why female genital cutting started?
Yes.
Yeah, because there were no men to marry. So what's the use of having basically a vagina that functions?
Yes, so that is the argument that the scholars to remain chaste, so that you don't jump from here to there. This cutting removes that desire to be engaged in those things, and so even for those who were married, there was a need for them to do the cutting so that these women will sort of remain faithful or instead of moving all over, because there were not a lot of people that they could be engaging in these activities with. That is the argument that Colonel Etab decided to put forward. And so it's for us to then look at it. Lisbeth, do you get it?
I think Lisbeth's battery went out.
She's now gone. Is it? So is it these women in the Red Sea trade, and we've mentioned it, some of the women who were exported were actually used as concubines.
Yes.
And as concubines, this act was performed so that they did not, they remained faithful, let me put it that way. And so the act was learned. The indigenes came to know of that activity and then decided to adopt it. And so it wasn't a development on the continent, sort of, but those who went to the Asian countries and experienced that, the Africans will learn of the act and then begin to also do same in the polity, just to be able to keep people chaste for themselves. That is what these authors are trying to say. So they trace the origin of FGM, FGC to the Red Sea slave trading activities. But then they argue that other people on the continent will pick it up and also institutionalize it for their politics, right? I don't know if that Lisbeth is off, but we're all having this discourse. Where is Ifna? Are we okay on that?
So my question is this act done by the Muslims to the Africans, the mutilation of the female?
So if I take the case of Ghana, for instance, yes, you have some, mostly again, communities in the north are engaged in it. Some are Muslims and some are not. Some are also Christians. But the paper did not really look at the religious dynamics that is involved in these activities. Only establishing that in the slave exporting places, you have this activity or the FGM going on in those polities. And so the argument then is that if you come to Ghana, again, those in the south, the Asantes and so forth and so on, up to the coast, this practice is not common among
Hello?
I think we lost Dr. Nemo.
Yeah, I think we lost him again. It always happens around this time. Like
okay, 9 o'clock is it now? 8 o'clock to him.
Yeah, and I was also out for a few minutes.
Yes, we noticed that just now. Yes.
Yeah. So I think he's recording as well. So I hope everything has been recorded because we both recording.
Okay.
Let's just take a 10 minutes break. It's 9 o'clock anyway. So let's take a 10-minute break. Then I will check up on him.
Okay.
Will we continue until 10 o'clock or will we stop at 9 o'clock?
No, we will continue till 10 o'clock. It will be a 3-hour course, but I checked the chat and there are no objections. There are not any objections of moving. There are no objections against moving the class to an earlier time. So I think from
yeah, but tonight, but that's for the future. But tonight, we were sitting here at 6 o'clock. So now it's our 4th hour.
yes, so sorry, I forgot about the time, the clock adjustments. We don't have that here in Ghana, so I forgot about it, and Dr. Nima also didn't know about it.
Okay.
So if you want to stop now, you're free to go to bed. I mean, but I do think that he had planned a 3-hour class.
Of female HIV infection in Africa by examining the slave trade, polygyny, and sexual behavior, have also concluded or established in their work that slave trade, the major determinant of HIV infection in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is how they came to that conclusion. They argue that by reinforcing the institution of polygyny, as we have already mentioned, the transatlantic trade influenced the evolution of behavioral norms, i.e., areas that were more exposed to the trade. You have married women becoming more promiscuous and thereby becoming more vulnerable to the HIV disease. And so they conclude that because these slave trading activities reinforced what Dalton Liu et al. Established, you have this situation where the HIV infection rates on the African continent has become so much accentuated and difficult to eradicate or deal with. Then another long-term effect, which I actually wish that we could have my host status back, but this deals with stronger supernatural or witchcraft beliefs on the African continent. Even today, we still have witch camps in the northern region of Ghana. Okay, I'm host now, so let me quickly come back and share. Where is it? Okay, right. Share. Okay. Okay. So, all right. So I'm talking about stronger supernatural or witchcraft beliefs on the African continent. So Gershon has a paper on witchcraft beliefs as a cultural legacy of the Atlantic slave trade. And he uses evidence from 2 continents. I take it from the first one. So on the African continent, he says that ethnic groups which were more exposed to the slave trade in the past are more likely to believe in witchcraft today. And so they tried to link historical trauma to the culture in African societies today. Then they also established that Afro descendants, especially in Latin America, are also more likely to believe in witchcraft. And this is their argument, that one, on the African continent, the perception of the slave trade activity was that it was a form of witchcraft in which European witches and their local collaborators enriched themselves at the expense of less powerful individuals who were unable to avoid being captured and shipped. So basically that the concept of witchcraft being that it visits mayhem on groups of people who do not possess that power. And then those who have it will enrich themselves. And so
Can I have a quick question, Dr. Nemo? Oh, he's gone. Nee, toch? Niet. Dag even.
It looks like he was kicked off again.
Dat is geen goede internetdag.
Nee, absoluut niet.
Ja, maar als het na 9 uur zoveel storingen oplevert.
Heeft Noord-Afrika nog steeds een internetprobleem dan?
Yeah, his lights are off.
Ja, als er na 9 uur zoveel storingen zijn.
Once the lights go off, the internet also goes off.
The lights go off?
Okay. And I have the same problem. I also don't have powers. I'm also falling in and out
Where is the
constantly.
power going in and out? In Ghana? Lisbeth, is the power in and out in Ghana?
So Dr. Nemo is in Kumasi, and that
Okay.
you can have like power loss everywhere, but it's not the same. It's not the same. I had power loss the whole day at school and now in the evening. So I don't know, in Kumasi, it could be different. But he's telling me that lights are off, so that means the internet is also down. So I doubt it if he will come back. Let me ask him. Give me 1 minute.
Okay.
I think he's back. He's back in the session again.
I'm back. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Hey,
Wow.
welcome.
Yeah, but the lights went off, and with it, the internet.
I was going to ask you a quick question, Dr. Nemo.
Yes, your hand was up. Yes,
yes,
let's look at that.
You talked about the witchcraft. How do people define witchcraft then? Because I'm very much confused. What is witchcraft?
Yes, that is the use of some supernatural power, to visit mayhem on some group of people at the expense of the other. And that is what is defined by these authors. That because Europeans, in this case, benefited from this activity by also visiting mayhem on the indigents, they saw this connection. They linked the slave trading activities as a form of witchcraft, where these Europeans are the beneficiaries and everybody else suffering as a result of it, because it brought death. Don't forget that it led to disorientation, distortions, so much in the society. And so they are looking at witchcraft as events that they could not explain with the author, physical mind.
Yes, but the author does not believe that like praying in the church is witchcraft. Because then you're also looking at the supernatural force to help you out. But the author, I'm not sure if it's he or she, would say, anything else but Christianity or Islam religion will be called witchcraft. Then is that the point where the author wants to lead us of this article you were mentioning?
So yes, the author is only establishing that because the indigents did not have control, sort of, and did not understand why some people were sort of captured and enslaved or shipped over the ocean and others were not. Then they felt that there was no practical explanation to the ability of the white man to enslave them. So they are not looking at it in terms of Christian religion or otherwise, but this was something that they felt that it mimics witchcraft. They're looking at it as any activity at which, because somebody has some supernatural force, they are able to sort of visit mayhem on another to their own benefit, and they couldn't do much about it. But that is a concept that they explain in the work. And so there are actually two things that they try to use in linking the trade to this activity. The second is that in response to the rising demand for slaves, witchcraft accusations and trials also became important tools, okay, for convicting and enslaving individuals. And so people were wrongly accused, even within the indigenous society, especially those who had managed to avoid capture and getting enslaved. They were accused of being witches and thereby also made to be subjected to the same sales into slavery activities. So they use this, the author uses these two mediums. The fact that indigents were not able to really explain the upper hand of the Europeans over these trading activities relative to their own, and the harm that this thing was also visiting.
I think the lights went out again.
I think so.
Well, it could be that the lights are out and that he's now on his phone.
Activities.
I'm also on my phone.
Okay.
Dr. Nemo, you were up for
You're
2
out.
minutes.
Yeah.
Can somebody tell Dr. Nemo what was the last thing they've heard?
He was saying he was talking about the activities who was accusing people for witchcraft. But who was accusing the people for witchcraft? Was it the missionary, the white people, or were this the Africans themselves who were accusing these people for witchcraft? Who was accusing them? The accusation of witchcraft, was it by the Africans themselves or by the Europeans missionaries? Because in Europe, they were also busy with witchcraft activities.
No, themselves.
I cannot tell. I lost you. Repeat it, please.
In our societies today, where hello?
Yes, we are.
Forgive me, it has started raining over here.
Oh, that's nice. That's
Hello,
good.
Sakata.
I hear you. Explain to me, yes. Accusation of witchcraft we were talking about.
Hello?
Hello?
It has... Yes, I can hear you. Forgive me, it's raining. It has started raining here, so the internet is affected, but I can go on. What were you saying, if I may?
The accusations of witchcraft, who was giving it to them? The Africans themselves, or were it the white people missionaries? I mean, the Christians or the Muslims who were accusing them from witchcraft? We ourselves, I mean, Africans ourselves, or the foreigners? Who was accusing? Who was talking about witchcraft? Also, you said in the diaspora.
Is the Africans, is the indigenous people.
Oh, we ourselves start doing. African themselves start doing that. Okay.
Yes, please.
Because
I was saying.
Yeah, I was going to say because it was actually at some point practice in big parts of Western Europe to burn women, females,
yes,
just accusing them of being witches.
Yes,
witches. And that's why we're asking, like, did that specific practice did they come also with the boats that came from Europe to Africa, or was it already developed in on the continent itself? So accusing people of witchcraft and punishing them, because at some point it was very, very prominent, especially when the church start to do what they do and establish their position. They also started to burn more females, also some men, but more females during I think it was 13th, 14th, 15th century already.
Yeah, so the concept is not peculiar to the African continent, but what these authors did not emanate from the continent, but the authors make these two forceful arguments. That one, so far as they found themselves at the receiving end of the slave trading activity, okay, and they felt that these Europeans were sort of people who had some supernatural power or whatever to have control over them, and so they were there. So that is where the concept comes in. And the second view is that then quickly indigenes who were able to absolve themselves from getting caught up in the maze were then also accused of being witches. And just as what was done in Europe, some were also killed and all of that. But essentially, they were also bundled up and sold into slavery. Yes. And as I mentioned earlier, even in Ghana today, when you go to the northern part, we have what we call the witch camps. The state is trying to clamp down on some of these things. I think they've been successful to a large extent, but once in a while, we still find out that some people have been accused as being witches, and then some of them lose their life most of the time, or there is a camp where people have been accused, mostly aged people and so forth and so on, are kept in those camps, and the conditions under which they are kept quite worrying even now. But essentially what these authors are saying that because this false accusation that, oh, this one is a witch and all of that, allowed them to sort of punish or keep those people in the witch camps and then sell some of them into slavery. This Atlantic slave trading activity will help to accentuate this concept of accusing people of being witches and so forth and so on. Satata.
Well, I'm thinking about the same in South America. You just said the African descendants in the diaspora also believe more in witchcraft. While they were all
they are
having the Bible constantly on their heads. You know what I mean? I mean, the African in the diaspora, they're the most worshipping people of Jesus. So the part that you say that they were more into witchcraft, I don't know.
No, so the author is saying that they are more likely to believe in the existence of these evil controlling forces. And that is perhaps what is pushing them to what you now term as they are more Christians. What are they fighting?
I think it's stereotyping Africans again, this story. You know what I mean? Because spirituality is part of Africans' legacy. And if you twist it around, you can make it dirty. And they wanted to impose the Christianity and the Muslim faith upon us. So everything African was witchcraft. So they wanted to kill all the marabouts, all these great singers and women who were strong in making herbal medicines and all that. They wanted everybody to depend on their system. And that's why they had a big hunt on people who were spiritual or busy with herbs. Yes. So that's mind control, I think. I don't know. I don't necessarily believe that what they say that's the truth.
So is it the case that in modern Latin America, people are not more likely to believe in the existence of witchcraft?
Interesting.
And I think there should be a differentiation between witchcraft and spirituality, because witchcraft is like you trying to manipulate the systems to do something harmful. How we call Wisi, you have Wisi, which is bad. So it's not the same thing, right? But I think they just grouped everything into one. So it's like, for me, it's confusing just to hear it just the way it's said, because the spirituality includes the medicinal parts, the herbs, that is our wellness, our overall balance. So when you just say witchcraft, is like, that's not what I know and what I practice. Is not witchcraft. I don't ever try to manipulate anything or whatever the case is, but we understand there's good and evil. That's even the basis for most religions in the world, is the idea of good and evil. But yeah, I think the part where you said like the witchcraft makes it sound dirty and ignorant, right? Like almost like, oh, there's like these ghosts over here and you believe that, like I think it just like is the meaning, like how they just say witchcraft, like just lump it into witchcraft.
Okay, so the term may be, so you want us to substitute it with evil, the existence of evil.
Yeah, I also agree with what has just been said, because when people speak about witches, if they want to speak about witches in a negative sense, they mean evil, dark magic. And then they will use the word witch. However, there are also people who are very spiritually, who are connected to the spiritual, and they themselves call themselves witch, but they don't mean it in a negative way. They mean it in a supernatural way, like they are medium for the spiritual world. I've met women who call themselves witch, and one of them even thought I was a witch too. So I was like, okay, I'm very spiritual, but I won't necessarily call myself a witch. So some people use the word in a negative sense, and some people use it in a positive sense, but then a lot of people are using the word witch in a very negative sense.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's that negative sense that these authors are putting it. So it's not the spirituality that we are talking about here. So the authors are focusing on witchcraft as a negative force, and that is the reason why people, you cannot in Ghana, for instance, to say that you are a witch, because the whole concept is that of the negative. You will not be able to sort of be free in a society. It's a negative conception that we have when somebody says the witch, right? And so that is the argument by these authors, the fact that did I hear somebody saying something?
So you will go deeper on this in African spirituality.
Oh, okay, Satata, African spirituality.
Yeah, you will go deeper on this also then about what we call witchcraft today.
Okay, I've noted it. We'll look at it. But when we take up a team on African traditional belief system and so forth, then we can look at it. But then just to establish that, anyway, if I may ask, do you think that there is any connection between witchcraft and then slave trade? Is there any link, whichever definition we want to look at it, especially the negative one? Veronica.
I'm just thinking, with a link, you mean, do we see that there's a correlation between witchcraft?
Yeah, correlation between witchcraft belief and then slave trade. The belief in witchcraft and slave trade, if there's any correlation, because that is what these authors try to establish.
I don't personally believe that there is, but I could see how the people from Africa in that time would think that maybe witchcraft is a reason for what was happening to their people.
Yes.
Because they're not understanding maybe the scale of the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade, and like you said, the powers the Europeans had, the ability they had to convince us to sell our own people to them, that they would sum it up to witchcraft. So that I can see. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Saskia, you're on.
I agree with, I don't know who was talking just now, I think Veronique. I think that it was too big for them to grasp in their time what was happening with their people. Then it's easier to contribute it to
associated with
something like how you call witchcraft.
Yeah.
That's what I think. But I'm amazed that in this time, still in modern times, when we have more information, still people are so focused on witchcraft. So I'm curious where that comes from in this time.
Well, from what I got from it is that our own beliefs in Suriname, our own beliefs as a people coming from Africa, we were not allowed to practice our own religions and
That's right.
our own faith and our own beliefs. And every action that was contributed to our
spirituality, yes.
Spirituality, our own African beliefs, was sunk under the term witchcraft. Lashana just mentioned, we see we have our own religion. We call it Winti.
No, but I don't think that Winti is something like witchcraft.
No,
No,
but
what's the
in
name?
those times it was seen as witchcraft also.
Yes.
Everything that was
White.
not Christian
Yeah.
was seen
Okay.
as witchcraft, and we were
Witchcraft.
not allowed to practice it. So that's where I grew up in a Christian home, and everything that was
Because for me,
seen as
yeah.
evil, as witchcraft, something to stay away from. It's at a later age that I started to explore it for myself and started to understand what our own religion is about. But
Yeah,
what
but
I know from
yeah.
being brought up Christian is that
Mhm.
everything non-Christian, especially everything related to our own African spirituality, was seen as evil, was seen as witchcraft.
But I think that if even we who are practicing spirituality, Winti,
Mhm.
if we take uh, witchcraft as a comparison, then we're also contributing because for me spirituality and witchcraft is something what you can't comprehend. You don't know about it because but spirituality, Winti, is a whole structure,
I know.
and witchcraft is something else.
I agree. But from a Christian perspective, it was seen as witchcraft. It was seen as
Witchcraft.
evil.
Yes. We are not allowed to
You were not
practice.
allowed you were not allowed to practice it. You were not allowed to know anything about it. You stay away
Right.
from it. It's evil, it's witchcraft. So now that I've explored it, I understand it.
Mhm.
And I know it's
I'm with
not.
you.
And I my mom is very religious, and I tell her also every single religion can be used for evil also.
That's right.
Even Christianity. But it was, for me, it was a measure of control from the Europeans also to have control over our people,
Right.
to distance us from our own beliefs.
That's true.
Because that's where we got that's where we got our strength from. And it was seen as witchcraft, and we believed it for a very long time that it was evil and something to stay away from. So I agree, Saskia. So I agree.
So witchcraft is a tool to undermine us. And witchcraft
Uh,
is a tool to divide us.
to divide us and to keep us under control.
Control. Yes. I understand this, sister. Thank you.
So being brought up Christian and exploring at a later age our own culture, our own spirituality, I've
Yes.
seen both sides of it. And I'm sitting with a light in my rear,
In the
so
back. It's
yeah.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, Kenneth. Yeah.
Yeah, I just unmuted, but I started my question with like, what is exactly witchcraft in this definition? And very
Mhm.
friendly, you already put it between quotes. So it was like witchcraft on your slide between quotes.
Yeah.
And I also from the other people speaking, I do also believe that it's okay. Yes, in first also people rely on supernatural forces to help them out, and it's in every religion or spiritual system that is the same. But some religions and spiritual systems have determined that others are how do you call it, not allowed or even bad. And whenever it's bad, they put the term witchcraft upon it. Because even what happened in Suriname in 1883, they put the religion from the African people, even after slavery was abolished,
Yes.
put it in the law for how do you call it, wetboek van strafrecht. It
Yes.
was in one of the law books that it was forbidden for anybody to practice this African religion. And then from the church they call it afgoderij. That is afgoderij. That is I don't know what is in English, but it's called something a blasphemous
Worshipping.
thing to do. And that's when it got the status of witchcraft also for almost 100 years in Suriname.
Yes.
So just the term witchcraft is just to put something negative on somebody's
Fear
else
in you.
spiritual belief, supernatural belief, or religious system. And yeah, so yeah, that's why I thought it's a complex term to use. I looked up Gershman quickly on the internet to see what her definition was. So I sent the link to the other people in the group also on the WhatsApp.
Yeah.
They can find the article and then determine what the definition is that this scholar uses around witchcraft.
For witchcraft, right?
And a lot of the times to make these for people to feel better, I think mentally they would ingrain Christian Christian perspectives, the Bible, saints within religions like Winti, and combine them together. Like Santa Maria, they do that too, like just to I feel like to alleviate their mind, because they had to then still go into the church. They still, so to make it feel better for some people, they do still ingrain, so they combine it in some ways.
Yes, like some
But essentially it stands on it has its own principle. It has enough to stand on its own as a religion.
Yes, that's what I was saying. If I can adjust, if I can say something also, because spirituality, Vinti, has its own structure.
That's right.
You don't have to combine it with Christianity.
You don't have to.
Oliveira, you raise your hand. You can go ahead.
We don't hear you, Mirella. Je hebt op je mute-knop gedrukt, denk ik, op je computer.
We can't hear you.
Kijk op je microfoon op je computer.
Oliveira,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I agree that you don't have to combine these two because Vinti has its structure of its own, but I was also raised in a Surinamese family, and the raising was explicitly about Christianity in the open and Vinti in the background, because it was not accepted to practice Vinti out in the open, because a lot of Black Surinamese people have been raised by this paradigm that it's wrong to practice your own religion. So my family, my family, it was always taught, don't forget this spirituality and this really spiritual helpers and guides. They're always with you, next to Christianity. So you don't have to combine it, but I think in a lot of families it has been combined. That's what I wanted to add.
Okay. Before we move on to the last one, Barbara, I haven't heard from you today.
Is she here?
Hello?
That is true. I haven't been very active, but I'm just following this class for now because I've missed 2 classes, so I'm trying to keep up. And then the next time I'll be more participating.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes.
Right. Then let's look at I don't know if the issue about the stronger supernatural witchcraft beliefs in these 2 continents as espoused by these authors and the attempt to link him is exhausted. But then, yes, the article has been shared for us to read and then look at the definition to help us to understand the linkages that these authors try to established. But the main conclusion here was that witchcraft accusation and trials also became one of the tools that were used to enslave individuals across communities on the African continent. We also look at the effects of the slave trade on conflict. And this is quite exhausted by Zhang and Cabrera 2016 when they look at impact of slave trade on the current civil conflict in sub-Saharan Africa. They established that the slave trade is a significant cause of the higher rates of civil conflict in the continent presently, right? Those who read the first article, you can share some of the perspectives on that as espoused by Mbamba. Kenneth, I know you read it. You speak to this conflicting situation which is emanating from the slaves as espoused in that article. Thank you.
Yeah, I think in the article it was also mentioned that at this moment there are also people who are from slave trading families or slave trading societies. And on the other hand, there are communities of people who are like now freed slaves. And there's always some animosity between those different groups. Also because mentioning that you're from the descendants of slaves or freed slaves gives you also often a lower status within, well, yeah, all the different type of institutions people have to come together. So probably work or school or whatever. So having this history and also still could be able to trace back the lineage does introduce some conflict within people who live close together. And it's also an interesting remark in this article. I'm not sure if it's that, but it was a remark that some family had a chain, a very long chain where they would how do you call it, capture people or how do you call it, take people for the on the slave route, and they kept it because even the sound of that chain gave people so much trauma or stress.
Yes.
That it was, yeah, I thought this was also something that is still lingering on. And yeah, when you also look at the different societies or city-states or communities that were raided by neighbors also, then it also, yes, especially because there's an oral tradition and people tell these stories on and on, it is not going away that soon. So, the only thing when I was reading it, I simply thought, because now there's like an international, sometimes a global movement to discuss reparatory justice.
Yes.
And I think maybe that will be something also to do some healing within this type of conflict, because the healing is definitely necessary before they can get together and build together a nation. But yeah.
Nicely said, Kenneth.
Yeah, thank you. Satata, will you add to it?
What Kenneth said, I agree with 100%. We just have to go on healing now and stop, accusing each other, one another for all what happened. Because if I look in Suriname today, the runaway slaves and the free slaves, or so-called free slaves, are in a big, I would say, fight with each other. The runaway slaves said, "We are different than you." They call us city people, and they call themselves bush people. So even today, not also in Suriname, there are 6 tribal groups. They call them groups, tribal groups, what I don't agree with. They are even not ethnic group because we came with one boat to the South Americas, but we are so divided among ourselves. And it's since slavery, that is. So if it is in the diaspora, I can imagine it is also in Africa still going on. So I think we have to make a bridge in healing, what Kenneth just said, to find out how we can work together as a whole, Africans together. Kick everybody out and we leave us by ourselves.
So yeah, essentially for how long are we going to allow this event,
Yes.
which happened to continue to shape the trajectories of our lives today? And so there's a need, like you are all suggesting, for us to begin to, but it starts with recognizing
right.
The impact,
Yes.
so that we can begin to deal with some of them, right?
Healing.
Yes, I know that it's very late. My light has gone off again.
I see.
Yes, so we will end the class here. It's 8 o'clock. It's back on. That's it goes on and off.
I see.
But it's raining. That is the what is accounting for that. But we'll leave it here. God willing, next week we are going to focus more on the diaspora, looking at the impact and some of the rebellion and resistance stories over there. And then after that, we'll look at colonialism. I take from the class today that I am to share all the articles based on the remaining topics with you in advance for you to have your weekends to read them, which are
en negatief chips.
Ik heb een vraagje hoor. Het is mij nog niet duidelijk hoe laat begint het nou? Om 6 uur of om 7 uur?
In de chat had Lisbeth die vraag gesteld en de meeste mensen waren voor en niemand was tegen.
Ja, maar hoe laat begint het nu? Nederlandse tijd.
Dan gaat het weer terug naar 6 uur.
Oké.
Ja. En dan is het
vandaag zaten we om 6 uur, maar het begon om 7 uur.
Ja, omdat, goed, dat begrijp je. Wij hebben onze tijd verschoven. Ja. En daarom was het voor ons 7 uur, maar voor de rest van de deelnemers.
Maar welke tijd moet ik dan nu aanhouden? Dat wil ik dus weten.
Volgens mij, als je goed naar de chat kijkt, dan kiezen we. Do you have to do it in English, Lashanda?
Ik kan je verstaan.
Ah, goed zo. Als je naar de chat kijkt, dan was de vraag gesteld, kunnen we terug naar een uur eerder?
Goed.
Dus vrijdag zal het 6 uur zijn.
Kenneth, I'm back.
Yes.
It tripped.
No, we were discussing Dr. Nemo, because in the chat we had a discussion, can we start again an hour early because of the Dutch daylight saving times? And I think on Friday, that's the next session we will have.
Yes. What's the decision? I think
a lot of people were in favor and nobody was against. So.
Oh, okay. So we start an hour earlier.
Yes, please. Yeah. So if you allow it for you, it will be an hour earlier. 6 o'clock also for you. 6 o'clock for us.
In fact, it's good for me because we are starting our end of semester examinations here, and I'm actually closing from there at 5 p.m. So I was looking at how I will be able to join the class immediately after supervising the examination. So when we do 1 hour before the closing section, I think I'll be able to organize myself. Yes. So that's fine by me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so on Friday we are meeting at Ghana time. That will be 4 p.m. for me. Okay, thank you all for coming, and I wish you all the best. So please expect the materials for all the remaining teams that we are going to look at, specific to the teams that we'll be looking at. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
everybody.
And thank you.
Bye.